I've always prided myself on being the kind of woman who gets what she wants. My husband, Daniel, is a testament to that. Successful, charming, and utterly devoted to me, or so I thought. Our marriage was the envy of everyone who knew us. But envy is a fickle thing. It blinds you to the cracks beneath the surface. It started with the little things. The way he'd linger on his phone a second too long. The faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. The late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings. I didn't want to believe it at first. Daniel loved me. He worshipped me. But love, it seems, is just another illusion. I decided to follow him one night. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, it doesn't matter. What matters is what I saw. It was a Thursday, the kind of night that feels heavy with secrets. I waited outside his office, hidden in the shadows of the parking garage. When he finally emerged, he wasn't alone. A man walked beside him, younger, taller, with a confidence that made my stomach twist. They laughed together, their voices carrying through the stillness of the night. I followed them to a hotel. The sight of them walking through those glass doors, side by side, sent a wave of nausea through me. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. My mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. Who was he? What did he mean to Daniel? And why the hell were they going into a hotel together? I didn't wait to find out. I stormed into the lobby, my heels clicking against the polished floor like gunshots. The receptionist gave me a startled look, but I ignored her. My focus was on the elevator doors as they slid shut, trapping Daniel and that man inside. I took the stairs. By the time I reached the 5th floor, my chest was heaving, my dress clinging to my skin with sweat. I didn't care. I needed to see this for myself. I needed to know the truth. The hallway was empty, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. I moved quickly, my eyes scanning the room numbers until I found the one I was looking for. Room 512. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. First there was nothing, just silence. Then, a low murmur of voices followed by a laugh, Daniel's laugh. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me like this? I was about to knock, to confront him when the voices stopped. There was a moment of silence and then I heard it. A moan, soft and unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my hand against the door, the sound echoing down the hallway. Daniel! I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. There was a scramble inside, the sound of footsteps. And then the door swung open. Daniel stood there, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair disheveled. His eyes widened when he saw me, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his face pale. Behind him, the man from the parking garage stood by the bed, his shirt off, his chest glistening with sweat. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and amusement, as if he found the whole situation hilarious. Who the hell is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the man behind him. Lila, I can explain. Explain. I interrupted, my voice rising. Explain what, Daniel? That you're cheating on me? That you're a liar and a coward? The man behind him stepped forward, a smirk playing on his lips. Relax, sweetheart. It's not what it looks like. Don't, I snapped, my eyes blazing. Don't you dare talk to me like that. Daniel reached for me, his hand brushing against my arm. Lila, please. Let's talk about this. I jerked away from him, my body trembling with anger. Talk. You think we can talk about this? You're disgusting, Daniel. Both of you. The man laughed, a low mocking sound that made my skin crawl. You're one to talk, Lila. You're not exactly innocent, are you? I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What the hell are you talking about? He stepped closer, his eyes locking with mine. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Or did you think I wouldn't find out? I stared at him, my mind racing. What did he know? What had Daniel told him? Daniel stepped between us, his voice pleading. Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping. No, it's not, I said, my voice cold. But you know what would help? The truth. Who is he, Daniel? And what the hell is going on here? Daniel hesitated, his eyes filled with guilt. Lila, this is my brother. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. Your brother? He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. His name is Ethan. He's my younger brother. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. His brother? Daniel had a brother? Ethan smirked, his eyes glinting with amusement. Surprise, sis. I turned to Daniel, my voice trembling with disbelief. You're lying. You're lying to me. I'm not, he said, his voice desperate. I swear, Lila. Ethan is my brother. We were separated when we were kids. I didn't even know he was alive until a few months ago. I shook my head, my mind reeling. And you didn't think to tell me? You didn't think I deserved to know? I wanted to, he said, his voice pleading. But I didn't know how. I didn't know how you'd react. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Oh, I'll show you how I react. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Daniel had a brother he'd kept secret from me. And now that brother was here in our lives, tearing everything apart. But as I walked away, one thought kept echoing in my mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The thought of stepping into that house, into the life Daniel and I had built together, made my skin crawl. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring into streaks of color as I tried to make sense of everything. Daniel's brother. Ethan. The name echoed in my mind like a curse. How could I have not known? How could Daniel have kept something like this from me? My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I replayed the scene in the hotel room over and over again. The way Ethan had looked at me, the smirk on his face, the way he'd called me sis as if it were a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was a nightmare. And I was trapped in it. I ended up at a bar, a dimly lit hole in the wall where no one would recognize me. I ordered a whiskey neat and downed it in one gulp. The burn in my throat was a welcome distraction from the storm raging inside me. I ordered another and then another, until the edges of my thoughts began to blur. That's when he showed up. Ethan. He slid onto the stool next to me, his presence as unsettling as it was undeniable. You look like you could use some company, he said, his voice low and smooth. I didn't look at him. I didn't want to. But I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, peeling back the layers of my anger and pain. What do you want? I asked, my voice cold. To talk, he replied, leaning closer. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You think? He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for my glass, his fingers brushing against mine as he took a sip. You're not what I expected, he said, his gaze lingering on me. And what did you expect? I snapped, finally turning to face him. He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Someone weaker, he admitted. Someone who'd break under the weight of all this. But you're not going to break, are you, Lila? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because he was right. I wasn't going to break. Not for Daniel. Not for him. Not for anyone. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. I want you to see the truth, he murmured. The truth about Daniel. The truth about me. The truth about everything. I pulled away, my heart pounding in my chest. And what truth is that? He smiled again. But this time there was no humor in it. Only darkness. That this isn't about love, he said. It's about revenge. I stared at him, my mind racing. Revenge? What the hell was he talking about? Before I could ask, he stood up, tossing a few bills onto the bar. Think about it, Lila, he said, his voice low and steady. And when you're ready to hear the rest, you know where to find me. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of his words. Revenge. The word echoed in my mind, a dark, insidious whisper that I couldn't shake. What did he mean? And what did it have to do with me? I didn't know. But I was going to find out, no matter what it took. The next morning I woke up with a pounding headache and a sense of dread I couldn't shake. The bar, the whiskey, Ethan's words. It all felt like a bad dream, but I knew it wasn't. I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, the hot water doing little to ease the tension in my body. As I stood there, my mind kept circling back to one question. What did Ethan mean by revenge? I didn't have an answer, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to find out. I dressed quickly, my hands trembling as I buttoned my blouse. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The city streets still quiet in the early morning light. I didn't have a destination in mind, but my feet seemed to know where to take me. Before I realized it, I was standing outside the hotel where it had all started. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. What was I doing here? What did I hope to find? I didn't know, but I couldn't turn back now. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cool air of the lobby a stark contrast to the heat of the morning sun. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on the elevator, the same one Daniel and Ethan had taken the night before. I walked over and pressed the button, my heart pounding in my chest. The door slid open, and I stepped inside, my reflection staring back at me in the mirrored walls. I looked tired, my eyes shadowed, my lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't look like the woman I used to be. The elevator dinged as it reached the 5th floor, and I stepped out into the hallway. It was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing on the carpeted floor. I stopped outside room 512, my hand hovering over the door. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I knew I had to look. I knocked, the sound sharp and final. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I reached for the handle and turned it, surprised when the door clicked open. I pushed it open and stepped inside, the room exactly as I had left it the night before. The bed rumpled, the sheets twisted, the scent of cologne still lingering in the air. I walked over to the bed and sat down, my hands trembling as I ran my fingers over the sheets. What had happened here? What had Daniel and Ethan been doing? I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't stop myself. My eyes fell on a piece of paper lying on the nightstand, and I reached for it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a note, written in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Lila, it began. If you're reading this, it means you're ready to know the truth. Meet me at the address below. Come alone. Ethan. I stared at the note, my mind racing. The truth. That's what he had promised me last night. And now he was inviting me to find out. I didn't know if I could trust him, but I didn't have a choice. I had to know. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, my hands steady now. I stood up and walked out of the room, my mind made up. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew I couldn't turn back. Not now. Not ever. The address Ethan had given me led to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I parked my car a block away, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to steady my nerves. The building loomed in the distance, its windows dark, its walls covered in graffiti. It looked abandoned, but I knew better. Ethan was here. I could feel it. I got out of the car and walked toward the warehouse, my footsteps echoing in the empty street. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, and I could hear the distant hum of machinery, though I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I reached the door and hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. What was I walking into? What was waiting for me on the other side? I didn't know, but I couldn't turn back now. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the dim light from the street barely illuminating the space. The warehouse was vast, filled with rows of shelves and stacks of crates, their contents hidden in shadow. I walked slowly, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of Ethan. You came, a voice said, cutting through the silence. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. You knew I would, I replied, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that sent a shiver down my spine. I did, he said, stepping closer. But I didn't think you'd come alone. I crossed my arms over my chest, my eyes narrowing. I'm here, Ethan. What do you want? He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locked on mine. I want you to understand, he said, his voice low and steady. I want you to see the truth about Daniel, about me, about everything. Then tell me, I demanded, my voice rising. Stop playing games and just tell me the truth. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, holding it out to me. I took it, my hands trembling as I looked down at the image. It was a picture of Daniel. Younger. his face filled with a joy I hadn't seen in years. Standing beside him was a boy, no more than 10, with the same dark hair and piercing eyes as Ethan. "That's me," Ethan said, his voice soft. "And that's Daniel, my brother." I stared at the photo, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because he's ashamed," he said. "Ashamed of me, of our past, of everything we went through." "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan's expression darkened. His eyes filled with a pain I couldn't begin to understand. "Our parents died when we were kids," he said, his voice low. "We were sent to different foster homes. Separated for years. I thought I'd never see him again. But then, a few months ago, I found him. I thought he'd be happy to see me, to know I was alive. But he wasn't. He wanted nothing to do with me." I shook my head, my heart aching for the boy in the photo, for the man standing in front of me. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would he do that?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "Because he's ashamed of where he came from," he said, his voice filled with bitterness. "Ashamed of me. And he doesn't want you to know the truth." I stared at him, my mind racing. "What truth?" Ethan stepped closer, his eyes burning with intensity. "The truth about who he really is," he said. "The truth about what he's done. And the truth about what he's capable of." I felt a chill run down my spine, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "I'm saying that Daniel isn't the man you think he is," he whispered. "And if you don't believe me, I'll show you." I pulled away, my mind reeling. "Show me what?" He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "The proof," he said. "The proof that will change everything." I didn't know what to say, what to think. All I knew was that I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when I was so close to the truth. "Show me," I said, my voice steady. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "Follow me," he said, turning and walking deeper into the warehouse. I hesitated for a moment, then followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever was waiting for me, I knew it would change everything. Ethan led me deeper into the warehouse, the air growing colder with every step. The dim light from the street barely reached this far, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist around us. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. What was he going to show me? What proof did he have that would change everything? I didn't know. But I couldn't turn back now. We reached a door at the back of the warehouse, its surface rusted and covered in grime. Ethan pulled it open, the hinges screeching in protest, and stepped inside. I hesitated for a moment, then followed him, the darkness swallowing me whole. The room was small, lit by a single bulb that hung from the ceiling, its light flickering weakly. In the center of the room was a table, its surface covered in papers, photographs, and other objects I couldn't quite make out. Ethan walked over to the table and picked up a folder, his expression serious. "This is it," he said, holding it out to me. "The proof." I took the folder, my hands trembling as I opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, and other pieces of evidence that made my stomach churn. I flipped through them, my eyes widening with each page. There were bank statements, showing large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts. There were photographs of Daniel meeting with men I didn't recognize, their faces hard and their eyes cold. And then there were the letters, handwritten, and filled with threats and demands. I looked up at Ethan, my mind reeling. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is the truth," he said, his voice low and steady. "Daniel isn't the man you think he is. He's involved in things, dangerous things, and he's been lying to you about everything." I shook my head, my heart aching with the weight of what I was seeing. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "This can't be true." "He wouldn't." "He would," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. "And he has. You need to see that, Lila. You need to understand who he really is." I stared at him, my mind racing. How could this be true? How could Daniel, the man I loved, the man I thought I knew, be capable of something like this? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me, undeniable and damning. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice breaking. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because you deserve to know the truth, he said. And because I need your help. My help. I repeated, my eyes narrowing. With what? Ethan's expression darkened. His eyes filled with a determination I hadn't seen before. To stop him, he said. To stop Daniel before he destroys everything, and everyone he touches. I felt a chill run down my spine, my heart pounding in my chest. What are you saying? I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze locked on mine. I'm saying that Daniel is dangerous, he said, his voice low and urgent. And if we don't stop him, he's going to hurt a lot of people. Including you. I shook my head, my mind reeling. I don't believe you, I said, my voice shaking. I can't. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. You have to, he said. Because if you don't, you're going to regret it. I stared at him, my heart aching with the weight of his words. I didn't want to believe him, but I couldn't ignore the evidence in front of me. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's expression softened, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and determination. I need you to help me expose him, he said. To bring him down before it's too late. I hesitated, my mind racing. Could I do this? Could I betray the man I loved, the man I thought I knew? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when I was so close to the truth. Okay, I said, my voice steady. I'll help you. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. Good, he said. Because we don't have much time. He turned and walked back to the table, picking up a map and spreading it out in front of us. This is where he's going to be tomorrow night, he said, pointing to a location on the map. And this is where we're going to confront him. I stared at the map, my heart pounding in my chest. What happens then? I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes filled with a determination I hadn't seen before. Then we end this, he said. Once and for all. I nodded, my mind made up. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I couldn't turn back now. I had to see this through no matter what it cost me. The next night, we drove to the location Ethan had marked on the map. The silence between us heavy with tension. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it was going to change everything. We parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. The night air cold and biting. The building was a warehouse, much like the one we had been in the day before. Its windows dark, and its walls covered in graffiti. We approached cautiously, our footsteps soft on the pavement. Ethan led the way, his movements precise and deliberate. We reached the door and hesitated, our eyes meeting for a brief moment before he pushed it open and stepped inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. We walked slowly, our eyes scanning the room for any sign of Daniel, and then we saw him standing in the center of the room, his back to us. He turned as we approached, his eyes widening in surprise. Lila, he said, his voice filled with confusion. What are you doing here? I stared at him, my heart aching with the weight of everything I had learned. I know the truth, Daniel, I said, my voice steady. I know everything. His expression darkened, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice trembling. Ethan stepped forward, his expression serious. It's over, Daniel, he said. We're not going to let you hurt anyone else. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. You don't understand, he said, his voice low and urgent. You don't know what's at stake. We do, Ethan said, his voice firm. And we're not going to let you destroy everything. Daniel stared at us, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. And then, without warning, he lunged at Ethan, his movements quick and precise. They grappled with each other, their fists flying, their voices filled with rage. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to stop this. I stepped forward, my voice rising above the chaos. Stop it! I shouted, my voice filled with desperation. Both of you just stop. They froze, their eyes turning to me, their expressions filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. This isn't the way, I said, my voice trembling. We can't keep fighting like this. We have to find another way. Daniel stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "There is no other way," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then make me understand," I said, my voice steady. "Tell me the truth, Daniel. All of it." He hesitated, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. And then finally he nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything." And he did. He told me about the deals he had made, the people he had hurt, the lies he had told. He told me about the danger he was in, the threats he had received, the fear that had driven him to do the things he had done. And he told me about Ethan, about their past, about the pain and anger that had driven them apart. I listened, my heart aching with the weight of everything he was saying. And when he was done, I knew what I had to do. "We're going to fix this," I said, my voice steady. "Together." Daniel stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "How?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We're going to make it right," I said. "We're going to expose the truth, no matter what it costs us." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "And we're going to do it together," he said. "As a family." Daniel looked at us, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. And then finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do it." And we did. We worked together, exposing the truth, bringing down the people who had hurt us, and rebuilding the lives we had lost. It wasn't easy and it wasn't without pain, but in the end we found a way to move forward. Together. And as I stood there, looking at the two men who had changed my life forever, I knew that no matter what happened next, we would face it together. As a family,